Welcome to our meeting tonight about energy and immune secrets and going with the flow. And by the end of the evening, you'll understand what this is about. It's a, we all say that health is wealth. You know, it's kind of easy to say that. And we say that the currency of the energy is not money. The currency of the earth is not money, it's energy. And people have been asking me for years, how come you have so much energy? If only you could bottle this energy. Where do you get that energy? So that's me just a few weeks ago on a boat in Florida. And here's where I did a 10-day kayaking and portaging hiking trip in Cape Cod just a few months ago, when a lot of my friends are always bemoaning how tired they are. Energy is the currency of health. That is really the bottom line. And a lot of people today complain about being tired. Health is really not having something hold you back from moving forward and having the energy to do it. And that's what we're going to be diving into, so that nothing holds you back. So the secrets of energy is, where do we get it? And how do we keep it? So we already know about exercise. We know about sleep. We know about we know about plant food, but I put my foot in my mouth for food. We know about circulation, but we don't know very much about nitric oxide. It's a little bit of a mysterious molecule. So we're going to be talking about nitric oxide. I've been interested in this for a long time. I did almost 3-year study at a dialysis center with Nathan Bryan, the world's expert on nitric oxide, with Jack Moncrief, who co-invented the home unit of dialysis. And we took a look at how being dialyzed, going through dialysis, affects nitric oxide. And we did a very deep dive and we published it in peer review literature. So I've been interested in taking a look on how nitric oxide affects the immune system, is an antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. Didn't know if you knew it was an antimicrobial compound. It protects against UV light. It's basically known as a vasodilator, a wound healer, and it modulates cell growth. So nitric oxide is one of the things we're focusing on, and then we're going to look how it plays a role with estrogen and the immune system. So what exactly is nitric oxide? It's called all kinds of different things. It's called a neurotransmitter. It's called nitrogen monoxide, or a gaseous molecule. It's called a compound. But the biggest thing is, it's a biological signaling molecule. Nitric oxide's nickname is NO. So NO is a biological signaling molecule. That's how anything gets done in the body, how life unfolds. One cell sends a chemical message to another cell, and that cell gets the signal to do something. And nitric oxide sends lots of messages, and many of these messages support health. So we're going to go through the body systems of what it does. So nitric oxide is an internal, powerful biologic signal that our bodies make if we give it the building blocks, and it's involved with many biochemical messages from the moment we wake up till we go to bed, and from the womb to the tomb. But about 40 years old of age, our bodies start to make less and less nitric oxide. Why is that? And what can we do about that? And what does that feel like? It turns out that when you don't have the signaling messages from NO, this starts to put the body at increased risk of a variety of diseases. Many of these diseases we used to call chronic degenerative diseases of the elderly, but they're happening more and more in the young. Cognitive decline, obesity, type 2 diabetes. And did you know that cognitive decline is happening more and more in people that are 30 and 40 years old? Part of that is because NO signaling is on the wane. So we're going to talk on how we tamp it up. That's going to be one of the places we head to at the end of this talk. So NO, nitric oxide, is made from a building block of an amino acid, L-arginine, by nitric oxide synthetase enzymes. And also citrulline plays a role in it. So amino acids play a role in making nitric oxide. And one of the funny stories I have to tell you is Susan Lark was a colleague of mine in California when I used to practice there. And she introduced me to her mother, who at the time was in her late 80s. And her mother had her boyfriend with her, and he is 36 years younger than her. And they were hanging out, arms around each other. They were lovers. They were together for a number of years. And I pulled Susan aside aside. I said, what is your mother's secret? What is your mother's secret? She goes, arginine. It's the bomb. My mother takes several grams of arginine in the morning, midday, and at night. And I've thought about her saying that because I saw her mother. I saw this young dude. I was happy for them, but I was like, I want to get me some of that. I want to look like that when I'm an elderly person, but looking like a young person, having intimacy with a young person. Arginine. She was taking large amounts of one of the building amino acids that make nitric oxide. So we can, even though it naturally wanes around the time many of our hormones wane, we can boost the production of nitric oxide. So arginine is part of it. NAD is part of it. We're not going into NAD right now, but plant foods give you lots and lots of nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, which is a mouthful, but plants give you lots of things to build arginine. So when you consume arugula and spinach and beets and watermelon rinds, you're getting the building blocks to make NO. But how often do we really consume all these foods? Do we make enough of them? Do we digest them? And what does NO have to do with mitochondria? Because most of this is taking place right inside our energy organelles. So when we start to get about 40 years old, people start to have less nitric oxide, although it's happening younger and younger. The symptoms of it are exhaustion, insulin resistance leading to diabetes. Men feel less capable of having an erection and less sensation. Women come in with less libido. I can't tell you how many women come in and complain that they no longer have libido or that they never had libido. I'd say 6 or 7 out of 10 women that come in my office say they've never had libido. And a lot of the drugs that help erectile functionality, what do? They boost nitric oxide production, but it's mostly in the vasculature of the genitalia. When you don't have enough NO, you don't feel strong. Heart disease is greatly linked to this. Exhaustion is the big deal. Exhaustion. And remember, this is the true currency of life. That's why I put it in here twice. I hear people complain about being exhausted all the time. You probably hear the same thing. My mother lived to be a ripe old age, and I never once heard my mother complain about being tired. Maybe I come from a long line of high nitric oxide people, but symptoms that your mitochondria are pooped are you're fatigued a lot, you get crashes of energy, you have cold extremities. It's not just for low thyroid. One of the things they talked about in Memphis last weekend was feeling cold. You shouldn't be feeling cold. Your hands and feet should be warm. That is a sign of mitochondrial dysfunction, and you got to think of your mitochondria, and if your nitric oxide is being intimate bed partners, they are in and out of each other, so much so that there's mitochondrial enzymes that make its own nitric oxide to make everything run. And we're learning that mitochondria isn't just the organelle that supplies the local tissue with energy. Mitochondria oversees, it has an executive function. So it oversees all of the dynamics of what's taking place in local tissue area. That means that nitric oxide is involved in complex regulation of local tissue area too. So when you think of mitochondria now, you got to think of nitric oxide. They're intimate bed partners, and they really need each other. So let's take a look at all the things. We're just going to run through them because this is a short talk. But the role of nitric oxide in the heart is really where nitric oxide shines the biggest. That's one of the reasons we took a look at what happens when a patient on dialysis gets dialyzed, because those patients have the worst heart disease of any patients known. They're the most adverse cardiovascular demographic. And as they get dialyzed to save their life because they don't have kidney function, so dialysis filters their blood, and dialysis only gives them about 10% of their function back, being dialyzed makes their heart disease worse. So I was at a Christmas party and I bumped into Nathan Bryan and I said, God, you're the big guru of nitric oxide. I think patients being dialyzed, it actually rinses nitric oxide out of the body. And if we gave them some nitric oxide donors or boosters while they're being dialyzed, we could minimize that. So we put together a huge study and we discovered that it was true that when people were dialyzed, the act of being dialyzed rinsed nitric oxide out of the body. If you know anyone being on dialysis, they need to take boosters that you're going to learn about in this little talk, because they're low. They're running on fumes of nitric oxide. Well, they're not the only people with heart disease. Heart disease is the leading cause of death for men, women, and people of any racial and ethnic group. It doesn't matter. More people die of heart disease. We get worried about breast cancer. We get worried about all kinds of other illnesses, but heart disease is the number one killer. And the biggest issue of heart disease, where the rubber meets the road, is the lining, the one cell lining. Just like the gut is only one cell all the way throughout the gut wall, the same way with your capillaries. They're only one cell thick. Isn't that crazy that God made such important little walls that um, they border off with, kind of think of it as the wall for a second. We must build that wall, and it borders off the bad guys and borders in the good guys, and it lets things flow in and out. That's the endothelium, the one cell thick lining of the capillaries. Its health is completely dependent on how much nitric oxide these one-celled walls are able to create. So they actually create their own nitric oxide, and the nitric oxide has to be stable and healthy to keep the blood vessels dilating and open and wide, so waste can come out of cells and nutrients can go into cells and blood pressure stays normal. But there is something that happens at this wall, this little one-celled wall, called the endothelium. Heart health comes down to endothelial functionality. How many oxidative species are there? So how much NO is there right at the cell wall versus potentially damaging oxidative reactive species? So one of the reasons we talk about taking antioxidants is to keep the NO in balance with what's going on so you have better heart health. So the other thing that makes a big difference is methylfolate from greens, estrogen. And that's why women have better health when they're premenopausal and have more estrogen, because estrogen helps these cells make nitric oxide. That's one of the goodies that estrogen does. And if you take your estrogen as a replacement hormonal therapy as you age, it still helps these cells to make nitric oxide. And one of the reasons we measure in the blood homocysteine, and we always want it to be under 7 or 8, is if the homocysteine is too high, that also blocks the endothelial's cell's ability to utilize the nitric oxide. So there's a big picture of balance right here at the endothelium. Do you have enough nitric oxide, and do you have not too much pro-oxidative damaging species? So you want your vitamin A, you want your C, you want all the reasons that you should be consuming plant foods to keep these healthy. Although I just had Rob Wolf on my show, and he was talking to me about the carnivore diet and how there are studies going on that some people are living very healthily just on meat and not on greens. This is going to be a conversation that's unfolding for the next year or two as we take a look at all of that. Well, because nitric oxide relaxes the endothelium, so it is like a yogic signaling molecule for the capillary system. When you have enough nitric oxide, you don't have high blood pressure issues. And as we get older and we have less nitric oxide, we have vasoconstriction and we have more blood pressure issues. So nitric oxide is a vasodilator. The more your blood vessels can vasodilate, the less you have blood pressure issues. We know that blood pressure occurs in 90% of Americans by the time they reach 70 years old. Most 70-year-old Americans don't make any nitric oxide. It's also the second cause of kidney failure. And of course, I just told you, but to treat kidney failure worsens the issue with nitric oxide. Many blood pressure medicines work by making the body make more nitric oxide because nitric oxide relaxes the inner walls of the blood vessels and allows blood pressure to come down to a more normal amount. So it gives you energy, but it maintains heart health and it maintains blood pressure health. This is Norman, this is Brian Nathan, this is Jack Moncrief, this is myself. This is the article that we published in Free Radical Biologic Medicine in 2013. We took a look at the acute effects of hemodialysis on nitrite and nitrate, and I just shared with you what we found out. It's just amazing that the very way to save kidney patients who no longer have kidney function is to worsen their heart. But if you were to give them nitric oxide boosters, you eliminate that potentially adverse complication. Unfortunately, because it's paid by Medicaid, the government was not interested in extending the lives of people on dialysis, which was a big stunner for us to realize, but this was the study that took us years to do. The other role that people don't know is that nitric oxide allows insulin to do its work. It allows insulin to do its work. So adequate nitric oxide inhibits insulin resistance. And we know that, so nitric oxide is needed for weight loss. One of the reasons you can't lose weight easier when you get older is partially due to not enough nitric oxide, because your insulin receptor, your PPAR gamma receptor, isn't as facile in allowing glucose to go in and out. And part of that reason is nitric oxide. Though type 1 diabetes is not involved in this, but type 2 diabetes, adult onset, is, and type 3 diabetes is now considered cognitive decline, or part of what goes on with a variety of the cognitive decline. So nitric oxide has a role in all of these things that we're seeing in the elderly and happening more in younger and younger people. So many of us are living longer, and we want to be healthy enough to keep making new memories while we're still able to access our old ones. But brain neurons need to remain robust. And when the brain becomes a victim of eroding events, cognitive decline begins to manifest. And that's the big C that everyone is worried about now. Cognitive decline. It used to be the big C, cancer, but we're worrying about cognitive decline. So this is neurodegeneration. What does nitric oxide have to do with this? In a healthy brain, nitric oxide protects an amino acid called cysteine. And cysteine lives in various parts of the body, but it's especially rich in the brain. And the process of nitric oxide protecting these nerves is called S-nitrosylation, and this also happens throughout the body. But brain nerve cells live longer and prosper better if there is optimal S-nitrosylation occurring in these brain cells. So the brain uses lots of NO for S-nitralization to maintain cysteine, which is one of the reasons when you have cognitive decline, you want to give your patients or yourself cysteine, and you want to make sure you're getting nitric oxide boosters along with the other things. If you go to my shows where I talked about Dale Bredesen, how people are reversing cognitive decline in mild and moderate cases, some of the things that they look at doing are boosting nitric oxide donors, making sure the diet is rich in foods that give nitric oxide builders, making sure there's hormones that also boost nitric oxide in blood vessels, and making sure there's cysteine, because that is so important to keep neurons plastic and functioning healthy. We all know that estrogen gives us good bones, and as women become postmenopausal, you're at risk of osteopenia and osteoporosis. But who knew that the middle woman is nitric oxide? So in this study, they showed that estradiol stimulates nitric oxide production in osteocytes, and that's leading to increased synthesis, and preclinical data support an important role of nitric oxide in bone biology, suggesting that nitric oxide donors may prevent bone loss in postmenopausal women. It actually keeps a balance between osteoclasts and osteoblasts. Osteocytes are the building blocks of bone. So estrogen stimulates nitric oxide, which then stimulates bone building cells. Estrogen, and the other hormone that does this is oxytocin. So estrogen doesn't just float into the bony matrix and help the bone have enhanced integrity. It does it through middle women or middlemen. And those two middlemen, one is NO, and we're not talking about oxytocin tonight, but oxytocin is the second one. So estrogen leans on other signaling molecules to inform bone to make new bone. So you want NO to keep your bones healthy, especially as you get older. And we are seeing more osteoporosis in men. We're seeing more osteopenia in younger women, just like we're seeing more other diseases. So all of the sexuality, the sensation, the orgasm, the wanting to have sex, much of this is related to the ability of these local tissues to make nitric oxide or not. So this is the one study called the role of nitric oxide in penile erection. In fact, how does Viagra work? Viagra basically works by boosting locally nitric oxide. So that's one of the ways you want to have vasodilation and you want to have circulation. And it's the same way with women. This was a study where they gave ginkgo biloba to women to facilitate better blood flow so they would have more sensation in their genitalia and want to have sex more and enjoy it more. They gave a single dose of 300 milligrams of ginkgo biloba, which had a statistically significant effect on body, mind, and spirit. And then they measured their nitric oxide production. And it turned out that the way that ginkgo biloba worked was by boosting nitric oxide. So anyone with any kind of sexual issues, you want to take a look at nitric oxide because it's very important in these tissues. And with cancer, it's a whole nother story. Cancer, you can have too little nitric oxide production, or you can have too much nitric oxide production. It's a Goldilocks deal, and you don't really know. So you just can't start taking methyl-doning supplements, even though you took a look at your genetics and you're low on the MTHFR, gene, et cetera. You don't want to just take a lot of methyl donors without knowing what you're doing. And whenever you take them, you want to taper up. And you'll know if you take more than you need because you feel better at lower doses, and then you start feeling more anxious at higher dosages. But what's very, very clear is that many cases of cancer are actually due to insufficient nitric oxide, so much so this article came out of pharmaceutical nanotechnology, and it's called The Controlled Delivery of Nitric Oxide for Cancer Therapy. And they reviewed how important nitric oxide releasing moieties or substances will be in treating tumor therapies, because nitric oxide tends to control tissues because it's intimate with mitochondria, which we now know is an executive controller of local tissues. So nitric oxide, mitochondria, in local tissues rules what's going on, and in cancer things are out of control. So many cancers need more methylation, more nitric oxide. Not all. It's a little bit of a dance, and it's a little bit of working with people over time to figure that out. We hear a lot of talk about immunity these days because we're in the middle of a pandemic. We now know that hormones have a lot to do with immune response. There's multiple studies and multiple papers coming out taking a look at the use of estrogen and progesterone, because women have less incidence of COVID and they have less fatality in COVID compared to males. They've now even have studies where they're giving large dosages of progesterone to men that get COVID and see how they do. So we know that estrogen has a lot to do with immunity, and here we're seeing the middle woman is nitric oxide. Appropriate levels of nitric oxide are very important in allowing estrogen to inform the immune system to make an effective defense against invading microbes. So estrogen treatment of mice markedly upregulated the level of NO and allowed them to fight off more pathogens. So I'm actually giving a talk in Florida in October all about the unappreciated role of estrogen in the immune system. And it's so huge. That's one of the reasons women tend to get more ill, is they have less estrogen when they're older. But part of its benefits are because estrogen boosts nitric oxide. It boosts it, as you just saw, in the lining, the one-celled lining of the capillaries called the endothelium. And it also boosts it in immune cells all throughout the body, Treg cells, T cells, B cells, all throughout the body. Estrogen boosts immunity, and in many of those cells, its middle woman is nitric oxide. What the other thing that estrogen does that I didn't know till I put this talk together is that there is a very potent vasoconstrictor that you don't want too much of because it drives heart disease, and it's called vasoactive peptide angiotensin II, and estrogen boosts nitric oxide that reduces that. So in many ways, estrogen and nitric oxide dance together. They do the tango, the Argentine tango. And what they allow is for the rhythm of the tissues to unfold in a healthy way so that there's less disease. What it is we're learning the intimate intermingling of all of these important molecules and the building blocks so that you know what to do. So NO basically gives us energy. That's its really big deal. And people that that have a lot of fatigue and many illnesses, chronic fatigue syndrome, mast cell dysregulation, POTS disease, many illnesses have along with it severe fatigue. Most of those illnesses have insufficient nitric oxide, and also a number of other factors that are already playing a role, because you have inflammation, and inflammation is very fatiguing. Inflammatory molecules, for example, like interleukin 6, when that elevates, you get fatigued. But as it elevates, your NO goes down. So NO does a dance between having energy and not having energy. Mitochondria has its own mitochondrial um, uh, nitric oxide enzymes to make more energy right inside the mitochondria itself. Um, NO plays a big role in mitochondrial respiration, allowing the body to create energy. Mitochondrial respiration is what we call the dance of making ATP, that's the money in your bank, or really the energy in your body or on your planet. NO rules the show of making that happen. In aging, we make less NO, and we have less mitochondrial integrity. We have more pro-oxidative molecules. So aging is excessive inflammation, insufficient nitric oxide, insufficient hormones, and more cells start to shrink. There's shrinking of brain volume, there's shrinking of skin, there's shrinking of different anatomical areas in the eye. But when you give hormones, when you give NO boosters, when you give a better improved diet and you reduce inflammation, you can revolumize many of these issues, even hippocampal shrinkage in the brain where you store your memories. It's now shown by functional MRIs, when you give it estrogen, you give it the right stuff, it revolumizes. So aging is shrinking. It is loss of volume, loss of mitochondrial integrity, loss of nitric oxide production. All is reversible. There is a God. We can reverse this, and it all depends on what we eat, what we take, what we supplement, and of course, always the background is exercise and your thoughts and so forth, but we're getting more specific here. So I love this little thing here. This is her in the ad, and this is her in real life. We want to be our own best advertisement, and we can do this. So impaired generation and signaling of nitric oxide contributes to all the baddies that we're fearful of getting. The worst is cardiovascular disease, because more people die of heart disease, high blood pressure, high lipids, diabetes. Many of these are improved by nitric oxide donors, and especially if given along with hormones, which you could see that they're great bedfellows, and together they help reduce inflammation, because aging is also a process of shrinking, and more inflammation. Adding nitric oxide boosters to this system has the capability of reversing some of that shrinking, enhancing vasodilation or circulation, and enhancing health. What's really interesting is I've been talking, if you've been following my work, about being able now to run in the blood molecules that I refer to as molecules of mass destruction. You know who I'm borrowing that from, because these are the molecules that drive disease. So one of the molecules that Dr. Mark Houston, he's a cardiologist, and he was giving a talk on this molecule because the different heart clinic, the Cleveland Heart Clinic, had come up with this molecule as being an identifier of people who are really at risk of stroke and heart attack. It's called asymmetric dimethyl arginine, or ADMA. And we measure this now in the blood. We can measure a variety of molecules we refer to as the molecules of mass destruction. And I've been measuring this in patients with kidney disease and with heart disease. But I didn't realize that one of the reasons that this is a marker for kidney and heart disease is that it reduces the body's ability to respond to nitric oxide. So there's many players that take a role into whether we make enough, we respond to it, and we have enough of it, or we have too much pro-oxidative free radicals that overwhelm it. It's always the bigger picture. There's always many factors all coming together in an aggregate to let us know whether someone's going to be well or not. And the more you can figure out what's going on, the better you can help them. And the way that we lower ADMA is by pomegranates. We give a quarter of a cup of pomegranate arils, which are the seeds, and we utilize pomegranate juice for people who can't get a hold of that, or dried pomegranates. And it tends over time with also improving the diet and getting people on good hormone replacement if they can handle it. And that tends to lower ADMA, but I didn't know that that blocked the body's response to NO. So it's always important when you want to know how your body's responding to the NO you do make and you do have. One of the molecules that you can run is ADMA. So what helps your body make more NO? Well, we already know that it goes down as you age, so youth tends to make it more easily. If exercise was a drug, we would all want to be drug addicts, because exercise does so many positive things, but it boosts the body's production of nitric oxide. And you want to consume nitric oxide precursors. And those are the veggies that are high in nitrates, like arugula and other greens, beets. Many people know that there's numerous articles, especially coming out of Germany, where they use beet powder to improve nitric oxide production, and they treat patients with congestive heart failure with beet powder. And there's multiple articles showing efficacy. There's randomized trials, there's systemic reviews, so it's pretty well established hard data. And also the amino acids arginine. You'll never forget Susan Lark's mother, who dated a man 36 years younger than her because she filled up her tissues with arginine. B vitamins are also helpful, and diets high in arginine are nuts, seeds, and animal foods. For example, pumpkin seeds are the highest seed that there is in arginine, and turkey is the highest meat in arginine. And I tend to keep a lot of pumpkin seeds. I keep jars of raw pumpkin seeds, especially during the pandemic, and turkey is the one meat that I do allow myself. So I was glad to find that out. Other seeds also have high amounts, but pumpkin seeds rule. They have the highest amount of nitric oxide of any seed. And then we know that watermelon, especially the rinds, are very boosting of nitric oxide production. Sesame seeds, so hummus is really great. Sunflower seed, I make a sunflower kefir that's to die for. And foods that are high in citrulline are often watermelon rind and other vegetables. So one of the reasons plant foods are good is plant foods help promote nitric oxide. It must be that when people are carnivores, they also eat organ meats, and maybe some of these components are in the organ meats. I don't know. That's going to be so interesting to find out more about that diet where people only eat meat. But nitric oxide, interestingly enough, is an unstable molecule. You know, it's a gas. It's nitrogen monoxide. It's called a neurotransmitter. It's called a signaling molecule. It's called a gas. It's called many names, like a rose by any other name, but it's not a very stable molecule. So it has to be constantly replenished. That is the deal. And if there's too many pro-oxidative molecules, for example, in the endothelium, it gets used up really quickly. So if you're eating a lot of junk food, you're under a lot of stress, you're not getting enough sleep, all the things that make a lot more pro-oxidative molecules in your body, they come from the way that you live, that will use up nitric oxide faster. You're going through a divorce, you're going through a pandemic, you're going through rough times, you use up your nitric oxide more than just the natural event of aging. So keep in mind that there's a balance, and you want to constantly be replenishing your nitric oxide, especially if you have fatigue issues, you're cold a lot, and you look and see that you have insulin resistance and many of the other things that you saw that nitric oxide was helpful with. So several studies have found that ingesting nitric oxide precursors, such as nitrate, which we get from green leafy vegetables, or citrulline, like watermelon rinds, or, for example, arginine from pumpkin seeds, you just learned that, that helps us keep better levels of nitric oxide in our body. So what you eat plays a role in the levels of nitric oxide in your local tissues. So people who are eating a much more junk food diet, they're more likely to have less libido because they have less nitric oxide in the genitalia. But then I have people who come in or eating perfectly and they still do. It might very well be that they have an elevated asymmetric dimethylarginine. They can't respond to the nitric oxide that they make, or they might need some hormones because hormones allow the nitric oxide to work. You see there's this tapestry of intimacy and intermingling of all of these molecules. So one, you can make it yourself from the building blocks, but two, you might have some issues that aren't allowing you to use it. So it makes sense to take some extra support to make more NO, because NO will really protect your heart, your brains, your blood vessels, your desire, etc. In fact, Dr. Mark Houston tests all of he runs the Hypertension Institute of Nashville. You go there, it's like the Cooper Clinic for the heart. He does a 3 to 4 day evaluation of your heart, and he tests everybody's ability by measuring those molecules of mass destruction to see how their NO is, and he gives almost everybody nitric oxide boosting supplements twice a day because he wants to keep their hearts healthy and make their brain have a lot more capable cysteine and make them stay younger longer. Part of the tool to do that is nitric oxide. So why I got into all this of talking to you about this is, one, I had done that research with Nathan Bryan and Jack Moncrief. We did 3 years of research on nitric oxide in our dialysis patients. We saw that as they dialyzed, they had less and less nitric oxide, and then they had more plaque, more heart disease, worsened blood sugar, worsened insulin resistance, worsened cognition. We saw the action. We saw it right in front of us in the dialysis banks of what not enough nitric oxide does to you. So about 1.5 years ago, my dear friend Susan Bratton, who I've had on my radio show, she's a goddess sex expert, teaches many PhDs in intimacy, and she knows that I wrote my book, Sexy Brain, and so we like to have some dialogues and conversations on intimacy. She sent me a whole box of her new products that she had, and the one that really caught my eye was the one that was a nitric oxide boosting blend of vegetables, because I had done all this deep dive already at the dialysis center. So I told my wonderful staff that's more like family now, Sarah and Karen, I'm going to try this. I'm pretty excited about trying this. And it's called Flow because she uses it as an enhancer of sensation and desire and erectile capability in both men and women. Because as you've just learned, nitric oxide production enhances clitoral erection in a woman and her desire and her experience, and penile erection and capability in the male. So it has a lot to do with whether you like it, whether you're getting it and you're enjoying it, whether you want to get it, whether you want to get closer to your mate. And because romance and intimacy are the glue of a great relationship, or of many relationships, certainly not all, but a lot. So I told Sarah and Karen, I'm going to give this a try. And you take one twice a day. It's made up of watermelon rinds and citrulline and many of the boosters that you've just heard about. And I was shocked within a few days. And most of the time you take nutrients because they make sense to take nutrients. But it's not as though in a few days you feel very dramatic improvements. Maybe slowly over months and time you feel better. Certainly with hormone replacement, you feel a lilt in your step quite rapidly. But within a few days, I was shocked at how much energy I had and sustained throughout the day. So I started giving this to a number of my patients. I just was in Naples 2 months ago, and this younger woman, she's in her later 30s, so to me that's a younger woman. She comes in, she says, I started Flow and I can't believe it. Within a few days, I've had so much more energy. And it's rare that you have a product that you have reproducible effects in person after person. So I've only used this product now on about 20 patients. I've just sent 2 bottles to Sarah and Karen, so they didn't get theirs yet. But the majority of those patients, there's only one, I think, that didn't feel like it made their energy very sustained from morning till night, and it happened very rapidly. So this is a product that I got pretty excited, and I told Susan, look, I wrote a peer review article on the importance of nitric oxide and heart health and kidney health. So I love a product that would do this. And the difference between this product, it's what's crazy is the only other product out that's a professional product was designed by Nathan Bryan. It's called Neo 40, and my girlfriend Janet Sand. So I've known Janet since we've both been in our 20s and going to motivational and medical seminars all of our lives together. And then she moves right down the lake from me. And I used to canoe over to her house and have dinner. So she designed one of the other products that's out there, but it's very expensive and it's not organic. So Susan said to me, everything in here is organic. It's the only all organic nitric oxide boosting product. And it goes at it differently. For example, Neo 40 is a combination of beet powder and a Chinese herb that Janet wanted to put in because she's an acupuncturist. So I've fallen in love with this product, and I said I want to do a little talk on nitric oxide because people need to know about it, because when you get your nitric oxide levels higher, it's better. But you just saw that there's certain things like ADMA that can make you not respond so well to your own nitric oxide. So you might be somebody that needs to take 2 twice a day for a few weeks if you aren't getting the response you want. And you can even measure your blood. It's just a serum test of ADMA and see if that's elevated, why it's elevated, and maybe go on some pomegranates and look and see if there's anything else you need to address, most often hormones. Because remember, nitric oxide works hand in hand with hormones and works hand in hand with mitochondria. That's why they are the three musketeers and they're so important. So nitric oxide is responsible, you've just learned it. It makes the brain work better. It improves the cysteine and the nitrosulfation, and that was a polysyllabic word. I just didn't do a great job on that one. It fights against cognitive health problems. Maybe I had a moment of that myself and I need to go downstairs and take some more flow. It regulates blood flow throughout the body. It supports healthy blood pressure. So anyone that has elevated blood pressure, which Dr. Moncrief would always say to me, the minute you turn 70, you know, you're going to need to be on blood pressure meds. Why? Why? Because you're not making enough nitric oxide. So interestingly enough, I have put most of my patients in Naples are already on blood pressure medication. I've put some of them on this product and they've been able to reduce the blood pressure medicine. I've only been working with this for about 9 months, 10 months. So I have not had anyone that's been able to totally go off at this point yet off their blood pressure medicine, but certainly it's a drag to have to take 2 or 3, and many of them now go down to 1. You saw that it's a vasodilator. It's a master yoga teacher for the capillaries, and it prevents heart disease, which is the #1 killer. And it is such a boon for energy. Energy is the currency. What does everyone want? You want energy to go and do what you want to do, to have the motivation. It's a terrible thing to work all your life, have rupees in the bank, and then you retire and you're too tired or so tired much of the time that you don't have the energy to do all that you want to do. I think getting nitric oxide in your tissues, and of course also looking at other factors if you're a complicated case, like hormones, like ADMA, because nothing is just simple and the answer for everybody. But this is truly an incredible product. So I've decided to sell this product on my website, in a section of my website called Products I Love. And this is, so you can just go to Products We Love right here, drlindseyberkson.com/products-we-love. Products we love. I do love this product. Can't wait for Sarah and Karen to get theirs. This is a really long one. We'll have these up on Facebook Live for a week. And if you are part of my membership, Smart Plus Heart, which is a growing community of seekers of nutritional, hormonal, and motivational truth, we will have this up permanently for our members. This will only be up on Facebook Live for free for a week if you're not members. So you might want to go take a look at these links if you're not a member yet of Smart Plus Heart. And just so you know, we had started Smart Plus Heart and said that when we get to 150 members, we're going to have a raffle, and we're going to pull somebody's name out, and somebody's going to be eligible for an intake with me, which normally costs $750 for free. So if you're not a member yet and you're interested, this might be a good time to join, because we're only a few people away from getting that lottery for somebody to get a free intake. If you go to my website, Dr. Lindsey Berkson, I have created these flaxseed recipes, and there's 2 of them. One is made up of many seeds that's really delicious and tasty, and it has many components in it that help your body utilize supplements like NO. And then there is a second seed muffin recipe for those who are battling hormonally driven cancers, because in most of the peer reviewed literature, you had to have 25 grams of flax, which is really hard to get down. And I made a muffin recipe that makes it very delicious to do that. So you might want to go to my website and peer around and look around and see many of the things that we have available to take part in. If you like information like this, if you like the deep dive, but you like a little bit of the entertainment and the way that I happen to deliver it, not everybody loves it. Some people do, some people hate it. If you're one of the people that's attracted to this kind of learning, this level of science, but on a level of conversation and where you can ask a lot of questions, don't forget to look up Smart Plus Heart. drlindseyberkson.com/membership, and you can take a look at the 1, 2, and 3 levels. And don't forget, we've got that lottery, that raffle that's coming up, and we're almost to the place where we're going to draw somebody for a free interview with me. So the free consult, don't miss out. This is me in my old room where I used to be seeing patients, but of course now most of it is telemedicine these days. B vitamins are also important. I'm not going to go into them in depth, but niacinamide has a lot to do with your body utilizing a nitric oxide. And when I just listened to Jonathan Wright speak in Memphis, Tennessee, many things that he treats, he uses high dose, time release, or sustained release niacinamide. So niacinamide is a cofactor of nitric oxide that we really don't have the time tonight to totally go into. And so I just wanted to go over with you all the ways that we can make energy. We can take flow 1 twice a day. If you don't get the results within a few days, you might want to up it to 2 twice a day for about a week, and then go back down to 1. Most people will do well with 1. If you have really elevated ADMA, you're going to need 2 twice a day. So there's mitigating factors. You might want to consider niacinamide, more plant foods, unless you're starting a carnivore diet, and then let's talk in a year, okay? You might have periods of eating less. We know most people eat way too much. You might want to move a lot, but sanely push yourself. Remember, I always like to say, you are not a China teacup. You want to consider bioidentical hormone replacement. And now you know that one of the ways that hormones work in women, but also true in men, is that they are intimately involved in nitric oxide relief. So let's take a look at our question. Oh, and knowledge is power. Remember, do you want to be able to date a guy that's 36 years younger than you when you're in your 80s, or date a woman that's 36 years younger than you when you're in your 80s? Knowledge is power. Susan Lark's mom was upping her nitric oxide many years ago. God bless Susan, and God bless her mother. So let's see, and I'll put my video back here, and we'll look and see if there's any questions. Take some water.
We do have some questions. Would you like for me to read those to you?
Yes, please.
Okay, so if you have any others, go ahead and drop those in the chat as we go. The first one was, you have somebody who is in their mid-50s who is borderline high blood pressure. Is it a good idea to just start taking L-arginine as a supplement?
Yes, L-arginine's the bomb. It's going to make nitric oxide. L-arginine is the bomb. The only thing is that sometimes when you start an isolated amino acid, you can have different things happen if the other amino acids aren't in balance. So if you initiate a single amino acid therapeutic, and then you notice that you get canker sores, or you start getting a little headaches, things that you didn't have before, you might want to take for 1 bottle's worth a backup multiple amino acid on an empty stomach, just to let your body balance itself out. But arginine is the bomb. But you can also take a product like this and develop, you take it any which way, but what you want to do is you don't want to age without more nitric oxide on board.
Sounds good. The next one is a dual question, but I'm going to read them both together, and then I can repeat one if we need to. How can you mitigate the usage of arginine as a precursor to nitric oxide for a person with herpes? And then the second part, is there a safe ratio of arginine to lysine to maintain the arginine needed for nitric oxide production without inducing a herpes activation?
You can just go around it with the other things that we talked about. You don't have to do arginine. You can take a product like this, which is arginine free. That's the reason that Susan designed this without arginine. She only used citrulline so that people wouldn't get herpes. Nobody knows exactly the ratio. It's only when you take more arginine than your lysine and you start getting a herpetic breakout. That's why it's nice to do it through greens and pumpkin seeds or a product like this that doesn't have arginine in it. You don't have to focus on arginine. So if you were somebody that had a big problem with herpetic outbreaks earlier on, you'd probably want to avoid arginine. But some people can take maybe 500 milligrams and then these many other things. You saw all the different precursive food elements. So there's pumpkin seeds and there's nuts and there's eggs and there's turkey and there's different meats. You don't have to just use arginine.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, the next one was, what nutrients does Dr. Houston recommend for increase in nitric oxide?
He doesn't recommend nutrients. He just tells people to eat a lot more colorful vegetables and take a nitric oxide booster. And the one that he uses is the Neo 40 Pro, which is about $100 per. I think the Flow is about $28 a bottle. And the equivalent of Neo 40 Professional is $100. So it's a different level. It's a different level of pharmaceutical. And that's what he does. He just tells people to eat a rainbow diet and to take an NO boosting supplement.
Okay. They were asking, I think you may have kind of answered this as you talked on, for Flow itself, the bottle serving size says 2. You talk about just taking one.
One twice a day.
Twice a day.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And does Flow, do you know if has the potential to assist with AFib?
I haven't, it has no studies on it, so I don't know. And I haven't done a deep dive into AFib and NO, but NO most likely, NO insufficiency is probably part of the sequelae that leads up to AFib. But she just came out with this product and she's using it more as an energy product, not as a medicinal food. So there have not been clinical trials or anything like that to date. That's an interesting question. You know, AFib is such a problem that's on the increase. And so many times if you improve someone's diet, you get them to utilize magnesium. That, you know, there's lots of articles in peer-reviewed literature about how magnesium insufficiency is part of what sets the ground for AFib. Hormone insufficiency, nitric oxide insufficiency. Many people that have AFib, you clean all of that up, they can stop having flares of AFib. And there are even some infrared machines where people who have been treated for years with AFib put these machines on their heart, and some of the patients in Naples are finding an improvement. So AFib can be improved, and it can even go into remission for periods of time. I don't know if you can really say you've ever totally gotten rid of it, but all of the factors that we take a look at it when we investigate root cause, we look at all of those things also with AFib.
Well, with AFib, and this one just came up, what type of magnesium?
Well, the magnesium that goes into the heart the best is magnesium taurate. When taurate is the chelating salt, so to speak, it helps deliver it more into the heart. But I also like to give magnesium sometimes where you do multiple supplements, where you do magnesium glycinate, magnesium taurate, magnesium citrate. There's some blends of magnesium that I really like. And often I give those in slightly higher dosages. And sometimes I like to give magnesium throughout the day. The reason I like to give Flow, by the way, twice a day is, remember, it's very hard. NO is very unstable. You want to keep replenishing it. So if you're going to take 2, take one in one time of the day and the other time of the day. So you try and maintain your nitric oxide levels more throughout the day. So you want to space it out because it's short-lived, and any kind of oxidative species tamps it down. So you want to try and keep your NO levels up throughout the day. What was that other question you just asked me? So I took a sidestep there. Sarah? Whoops, I lost Sarah.
It was about magnesium. So in which types of magnesium? Right. I was getting back to it.
So the other thing with magnesium, it's very hard to absorb magnesium. For some reason, nature made a glitch with magnesium. It gets rinsed out when you're under stress. It gets rinsed out if airplanes fly overhead. They have studies of people who live under the pathways of airplanes. And how much their magnesium gets rinsed out into their urine. It's very, very hard to hold magnesium in the body, and you need it. It's a cofactor for 1,000 enzymatic actions that take place in the body. So magnesium is very hard to absorb. So for people who have a magnesium insufficiency illness, a serious illness like AFib, I like to give very small amounts, like 50, 60 milligrams of a gentle magnesium, like a citrate, throughout the day, because then they can handle it throughout the day. Nick Gonzalez did this with his cancer patients. He would give very small amounts of magnesium throughout the day, because if you're ill, it's very hard to absorb 200 milligrams of magnesium, 400 milligrams of magnesium, and you really need hundreds of milligrams of magnesium to function really well and help get yourself over an illness. And AFib is any kind of contractual illness. I used to work with a cardiologist in Tulsa, and he would always say, rhythm problems with the heart, they're mineral problems. They're mineral problems. You got to get those minerals stabilized. That's why we love elderly docs. They've been around forever, and they've seen all these different things with patients. So minerals are the bomb with stabilizing the heart, but it's very hard to take enough minerals in 1 or 2 times a day, especially magnesium. So magnesium, you have to do a whole entire dance. We could talk about magnesium for like an hour and a half. It's not as simple as buying a bottle and just popping it in your mouth. And it's not as simple as reading a label, because if it says magnesium glycinate, 185 milligrams, you don't know how much of that magnesium glycinate is the binding acid and how much of it's really the elemental magnesium. That's a whole nother story. So it's not easy to absorb magnesium. When people are very ill, it becomes less and less easy. When people are over 50, 60 years old, their digestion is even more compromised. So now you're dealing with somebody who you have to baby feed enough magnesium throughout the day, slowly, gently, since you're not giving them an IV, which would be the ideal thing, is have them come into the office and get an IV several times a week, but they're probably not going to do that. So you got to baby feed the blood vessels to get enough. And then the whole story is, as you get older, your blood gets thicker. And we're now learning that as you age, your blood becomes hypercoagulable. I just gave a whole entire talk. If you're in my Smart Plus Heart group, we had an entire talk about the new role of the capillary blood system in immune functionality, and how people who never can seem to get well, the chronic fatigue patients, the Lyme patients, the mast cell, the histamine, on and on and on, part of the deal is they're taking these supplements, but they can't get the supplement to the red blood cell, and then they can't get the waste from the red blood cell out because the blood is too thick to allow this to happen. So that's a whole nother thing. We now have a panel of blood tests, which is growing, to take a look at suggestions as to whether this is an issue in somebody. So AFib is a serious illness. You're not dealing with someone that just has a magnesium insufficiency and just give them magnesium. It's more nuanced than that. So you need to work with somebody that understands those nuances and that patient, and can put those two things together in an effective program for that patient. And the proof is in the pudding. Are the flares stopping, and how do they feel? You know, how do you feel? And is your problem going away and it's in your rear view mirror? That tells you that what you're doing is being effective. And if that's not happening, then what you're doing at this moment for that patient isn't being effective.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick question from our Facebook group. There's someone on there who has asked, can they take Pro-Argi-9 safely? It's P-R-O-A-R-G-I-9.
I don't know what that is, so okay. I can't say.
All right, that's good. And then to go back to, we have somebody, we talked about one thing, she talks about breast cancer patients. So what can a breast cancer patient on aromatase inhibitors do?
Well, they can do NO. It's not contraindicated with aromatase inhibitors.
Okay.
But, you know, just know that estrogen does, so aromatase inhibitors block the production of estrogen. Well, they block the enzyme aromatase, which makes in a lot of peripheral tissues intracrinologically. So endocrinologically, we make hormones through our glands. Endocrinologically, we make hormones through our periphery. And we make estrogen in our periphery from testosterone through the enzyme aromatase. So we make a lot of estrogen that way. And when we're older, we make a ton of estrogen that way. And males make all their estrogen that way. So that's a big part of hormones that's not even been looked at yet, that's in academia, but not in the clinical trenches yet. I was just talking with a pharmacist yesterday, Sahar, who owns a compounding pharmacy in Ann Arbor. And she said at A4M, we want to start teaching about endocrinology because no one's looking at this. There's a whole other way we make hormones throughout the rest of our body. There's no way to test it, no way to treat it. So hormones are not, we don't know the final answer of the hormone story by any question, but hormones are very intimately involved with NO. So if you're tamping down the production with an aromatase inhibitor, because you got to take it because you're ill and this is what you've been prescribed, then a number of tissues that normally function with those hormones are not going to be functioning well. This would be a great reason to take a product like any of the nitric oxide boosters, because you don't have your own hormones to boost your own production of nitric oxide. You need this. So women on aromatase inhibitors should be taking NO boosting products. That would be helpful for them. Or men, if a man has, more men are getting breast cancer. So it's not just women anymore. It's also males. Yeah.
So what about taking this product or NO when you are having trouble with high oxalates?
I don't think it has any problem with oxalates. And, I think this whole thing with oxalates, I think that they've gone down the rabbit hole. It's not like you can just avoid oxalate foods. I mean, why do you have that problem with oxalates? What's going on in the balance of your body and what's going on in the dynamics? It's not, because most of high oxalate foods are healthy foods. They're greens and they're all kinds of foods that you really should be eating. So you should be eliminating all those foods. You have to do a deeper dive to find out deeper and deeper and deeper what's going on. But if you're avoiding certain foods because they aggravate you and you know this, then don't eat those foods. There's plenty of things that help boost NO. So if you are aggravated by some of the things that boost NO, then just go to the other things, the other kind of foods, because there's plenty of foods or products that boost NO. But this whole thing with oxalates, I think people have become very hypochondriacal. I think we're so ill as a country that we've lost our center and we're terrified. We're terrified of the pandemic. Our kids are being ill. We get these symptoms. We're in these Facebook groups. Nobody can get well. And people become terrified and they just start minimizing their life more and more and more. I see this happening and I'm not saying I know all the answers, but why are we so ill? And why a healthy person doesn't need to minimize like that. So I say to Karen all the time, if someone is got this much going on, there's a hidden infection they haven't found out, their blood is hypercoagulable, there's something they haven't seen, because I have found in practice, and I've been in practice for decades, that when you find the right answer for an ill person, then everything falls into place. In a few months, they start feeling better. But sometimes it's a year's journey, years and years to get to the right answer. But it's not usually minimizing more, it's bumping into the right answer. So it's all based on your own physiology. If you know foods that you can't eat, but they're NO boosting foods, eat the other NO boosting foods, but perhaps work with a seasoned practitioner that will look at you in a different way so that you don't need to keep avoiding and minimizing your life. That's not living. That's not healing. That's just surviving till you figure out the real answer of what's going on. A whole nother world are peptides. A whole nother world is genetics. A whole nother world. I was talking to Sahar yesterday, and we were saying how many people are being helped by IV NAD, but it's so expensive and it's a rough IV to give that to patients. So she's making an iontophoretic patch that delivers NAD. So there's a lot of things coming down the pike that are different answers, because I hate to see people getting into a more and more of a box. I can't eat this. I can't eat this. I can't do that. I can't do that. I am an ill person. This is my identity. These foods are all my enemy. They're all my kryptonite. That is not the way I want someone who's healing and getting well to act. So when someone comes in like that, I know they've gone down the wrong paths to find why they're ill, because they shouldn't have to minimize themselves that much, in my opinion. Um, that's just my opinion. And I it saddens me to see us all become so hypochondriacal and live a life that's less than. So I try with what I learned to help people live a life bigger than. Not always easy said than done, but there's usually means that the rock to lift up to find your answer underneath hasn't been lifted up yet for you.
Yeah, this person was saying that they, in addition to oxalates, also have mold issues and probably some parasites. So, and they've been
Yeah,
working on this for 2 or 3 years.
when you have all this, then those aren't your issues. If you've got all this going on, that's all the fluff at the top. That's not all that what you have. You have something deeper. Whether it is the hypercoagulable blood, I don't know. But that's what everyone's coming in like that these days. I have Lyme, I have chronic fatigue, I have this, I have that. I've had it for 15 years. I can't do this, I can't do hardly anything. That is the typical patient showing up in America, not showing up in Italy, not showing up in New Zealand. Why is that? Our typical woman today is a woman with a diagnostic list of like 100 different diagnoses, and she's still ill, doing all these things. It's really, we're in a pickle. We're in a big pickle because many people are sadly suffering like you are with so many things. I say, in my mind, as a practitioner, that the root cause has not yet been seen for you, because all of these things are not the reason you're ill, because you've probably already been addressing them if you have them for 2-3 years. So I don't know, and it doesn't mean that it's easy, and I don't mean to minimize it. We have some people that we love dearly that are on a journey and have not yet found what works for them. But I have found in practice that when you do find, you bump into the right answer, the right root cause, everything falls into place. And in a few months, that patient is well. And if that hasn't happened yet, then hanging you on your Lyme or your pathogen or your this, or that, they're not it. They're what's hiding you from what's really going on underneath. And I wish for you that you bump into the right practitioner that gets you off this merry-go-round of being Velcro to being ill. I really do. I have been ill myself a lot and had many doctors say, this is it for you. You just need to learn how to age more gracefully. And that wasn't accurate, that we hadn't found the right cause. And now I get to have in my older age the youth I never got to really enjoy in my younger age. So I feel about this very passionately because I've spent so many years bumping into walls and being ill and having people look at these other elements of these other diagnostics and saying that you have this, you have this, you have this, but not getting to the real issue that allows your body to be well. And I know that you can achieve wellness even when you're older, but it's finding that underlying cause or what works for you. So it's very exciting in Memphis, Tennessee, to hear Dr. Kent Holtorf talk about hypercoagulable blood. He uses heparin to thin out the blood, but there's many things that you can do, and it's something that I'm starting to really take a deep dive on a lot of my patients. And I'm thinking that might be an answer for some people, that you're not getting well because all these great things you're taking in can't get down to the cell. So I'm hoping that this holds answers for some of you that have been suffering too long. But if you're suffering that long, then these diagnoses aren't helping you. Looking in those spaces and those Facebook groups, they're not helping you. That's not what's going on. Now, I don't know what's going on. It's not a case that I'm clear about, but I hope and I pray that you really find it, because I do believe that we are designed to heal.
Now, another quick question from Facebook group is this product, the Flow product, an excellent product for my 82-year-old mother?
Yes. Yes.
So, and I know you talked a little bit about, hormones and nitric oxide and everything working together. We have a couple of hormone type questions. One person who's actually one of our pro level members asked the question that a patient of hers had emailed her. She had a hysterectomy at age 36, and their doctor wants to know why she would want bioidentical hormones. Do you have a good one or two liner?
Wait, what's the
for that.
question? So
The,
she's on hormones though because she had
she
history.
had a hysterectomy, and the doctor wants to know why she would
Well,
want
did
them.
she have her ovaries removed or are they still in? I don't know whether she had an oophorectomy with her hysterectomy or not.
Uh, yeah,
So,
we'll need to ask.
the
Let me know that one.
Mayo Clinic clearly stated that women who have hysterectomies, but these were complete
Yeah,
hysterectomies
their
with
ovaries were removed.
no
So,
ovaries. So your ovaries never work the same, even if they're left in. And it varies from woman to woman how they work. But if your ovaries were removed and if you don't go on hormones and you're under the age of 45, you have a statistically significant increased risk of a fatal myocardial infarction. So you got to be on hormones if you remove your ovaries, especially before the age of 45. So the Mayo Clinic has clearly published 2 papers on that and shown that younger women need hormones. If you take the ovaries out, you better give them some hormones. Now, if you're 36 and you left your ovaries in, they don't tend to work as well just by having that abdominal surgical intervention. And some women end up becoming in need of hormone replacement at a younger age than they might have by having a hysterectomy. And I also don't even know why you had the hysterectomy. So that tells a lot, like why did you have a hysterectomy at 36? But if you're feeling that if you've measured your hormones and they're insufficient, and you have many of the symptoms of hormonal insufficiency, such as fatigue and waist thickening and osteopenia and a little bit of cognitive decline, all the things that we see in younger women whose hormones are really going south, then taking hormones is a great idea. We believe in bioidentical hormones more than not. For example, like conjugated equine estrogen is Premarin, and we have always, in the functional world, appreciated molecular structure that looks identical to the hormones that nature made for you. But we've learned in the last few years, especially by the work of Avram Blooming, who wrote the book Estrogen Matters, which you should all get, that any hormone, even if it's not bioidentical, is better than no hormone at all. They're so incredibly powerful. So hormones are very helpful, and it all depends on how your body is handling the surgical procedure that you went through. If you have insufficient hormones, even though you're young, you might need to consider replacement. And sometimes, even functional doctors these days might give a little bit of bioidentical hormone as a topical, as a vaginal, and they might even also add a Vivel dot, an estradiol dot, which is it is a bioidentical, but it's given as a commercial product. So there's many combinations and permutations based on your own body's levels of hormones, your symptoms, what you went through, the causation of why you had the hysterectomy, all of that plays a role. It's hard to say exactly. And bioidentical hormones we think are ideal, but any hormone is better than no hormones at all because they're such powerful signaling molecules that we rather not have you age, especially at a young age like 36. You're in the prime of your life. You want your hormones on board. So you need to work with somebody who appreciates that. They don't teach a lot of this in med school. So when you go and you ask your gynecologist, sometimes you hear that they don't believe in hormones, but they're not a religion. They're a physiologic fact. And they're some of the most powerful signaling molecules in the body. And if more women were educated on hormones and their benefit, we'd have less women in wheelchairs and hallways rotting away in nursing homes with no mentation capabilities. Hormones save your brain and save your ability to walk and stand up, so much so that many of the countries in the Netherlands have done deep dives into how hormones slow down aging and prevent many of the comorbidities that we've come to think of in America as inevitable with aging. So they give hormones for free to women as they hit their 50s or whatever year they go into menopause. They're now giving hormones for free in many of these countries to not topple their national health care programs. They're giving it, and they've been tracking these women now for over 2 decades. They have tumor registries and cardiovascular registries and death registries, and they take a look at who gets what. And women on hormones have less breast cancer and less heart disease and die less young from all-cause mortality and have higher quality of life. So hormones are the bomb. They're becoming to be more and more respected. I've been reading recently a lot of review articles that came out this year, last year, and they're all starting to say in the abstract, the Women's Health Initiative was a statistical fiasco. We know that hormones now are safe for even some women with cancers. Which cancers are they safe for? Our whole understanding of hormones is changing. We're seeing it in the printed peer-reviewed data. I'm lecturing this year all over the country on the vindication of estrogen because this needs to be said. Avram Blooming is an oncologist, and he wrote an entire book on how estrogen protects against breast cancer in his 14-year trial of giving estrogen replacement to breast cancer survivors. And he spun off a paper every 14 years. At 5 years, he spun off a study paper. At 14 years, he started off a conclusion paper, and his 248 breast cancer patients who had already had breast cancer, who went on Premarin, by the way, he works for Wyeth, had less recurrence, less mortality if they did recur, and a higher quality of life. So the doors are opening. Hormones, estrogen is not causing breast cancer. That is gone. We now know for certain estrogen therapy in healthy women decreases the incidence by 23% of breast cancer. And if you get breast cancer while you're on hormone therapy, it decreases your risk of dying from it by 44%. Once you add a synthetic progestin, that's a whole nother debate and story. But the understanding of hormones is changing. Now we learn through COVID that hormones dictate our immune system. Women have more estrogen, they have a better response with COVID. We're looking at this every which way. So that's one of the reasons the elderly get more pneumonia and die, get more infections and die, because they have less hormones on board. So it's one of the technologies that we have that's the most powerful anti-aging technology that we do have. So these decisions, if you had a hormone, you had reproductive organ removed, you have to find out why you had it removed, what your levels are at now, what your symptoms are now, and there's all kinds of combinations that are possible for you to take for hormones. I hope that was an answer that wasn't too long-winded. I'm pretty passionate about this because I had
You
breast
are.
cancer 28 years ago, and I've been on hormones for 23 years, I think, and I wouldn't be who I am today without being on hormone therapies. And everyone told me I couldn't take them. Everybody told me I couldn't take hormones, and I didn't listen to anyone, and it was scary. And I'm so glad that I read the literature and saw the scientific fact. And now I get to have all this energy to be talking to you for a long time this evening.
Most definitely. And there are several more questions, but we're coming up on time. But a lot of those are dealing with progesterone and hormones. And I will say that you do an excellent job of covering those. You did a whole webinar in, I believe it was January, that was a free webinar at the time on progesterone. But those are a lot of the topics that you do cover in your Berkson Live level membership, and you do touch on them within the private Facebook group as well. So, but there are two questions that I do want to make sure that we get to. One is a Facebook comment, and I just love it. It made me giggle. I also have an 82-year-old mother, and it's good to know that people that age can take flow. However, my concern is, could it boost the libido in those old people? Because we wouldn't want that, to be honest.
I love that question. What a great question. What a loving daughter. You want to help your mom out, but you don't want to cause a problem. How sweet is that? So I don't think if there isn't an object of the other, the beloved, that this product will create a desire like going on hormones would. But I really wouldn't want to be alive without having that little tinge in my southerly area. I want to be turned on. I want to be turned on even if I'm not in a relationship, even if I'm older. But that's me. I believe that being somewhat turned on is being part of being turned on to life. I see libido and those sensations down there is not something to shut off. I don't see any reason you can't be making love with the one you're with if in your 80s and your beloved is gone. I don't see any reason not to have that. But I remember when my mother had prolapse when she was older, And they gave her a little estrogen cream to put there, and it disturbed her that she started feeling sensations again. And she and I had a discussion about this, and she didn't want to feel those sensations. So it's a personal thing, and you might want to have a conversation with your mom and see where she's at with that. Is that totally written off for her? She doesn't anymore, you know, have any interaction with her own body in that way that still feels alive and good to her? Or is that something she really does want to zip up and put in the closet and not ever think about? I think that we have a concept of the older person that this is something they don't have, they don't want, it shouldn't be part of their picture. Whereas many of my patients in their 80s, even in their 90s, are having sex, having love, having sensation, enjoying it, getting more turned on to life, getting less pharmaceuticals. So these are lifestyle, personal, and cultural questions that are great conversations for a loving daughter and mom to get into if she's comfy with that. My mother and I could talk about this. And she said, I don't want to feel that right now. I really don't. And we got into, she said, but I loved feeling it when I did. And we had this great, actually, now that I think about it, it was one of our bonding conversations. But so, yeah, I think you need to ask your mom those questions because there's no reason she shouldn't have that. But I don't think that flow will do that. I don't think it's that powerful for someone in the 80s to do that. But if she takes flow, and she does feel some of those, what do they call them? The lavender phase sensations. Please let me know. I would like to know. Inquiring minds would like to know.
All right. Well, I know that we need to wrap up, but there was one question that I thought was good because tonight we've talked about flow, and the link is in the chat for that product. We've also talked about your memberships, and you always, when you do these free webinars, delve deep, and it's something that you love, and you go even deeper and interact face to face over Zoom with your members in the monthly webinars, which I think is great. And anybody that has an interest in that, it's definitely time to check that out because we will be drawing here soon for the person that's going to win that free consult with you. But the one last question, go ahead.
Okay, you said one last question.
Yeah, one last question that I think would be good is someone asked, when are you going to build a compound for all of us midlife single ladies to soar and eat flax all day? And I think that kind of blends into some exciting news that you have coming down the pipeline here in the next couple months that you may or may not have announced with some product lines.
Oh, so I have a brand new product line coming out with biotics. It's coming. I don't know exactly when it's coming out. It's imminent. We've been working on the marketing material. We're pretty much getting close to done. So I have a receptor detox to keep your receptors. Hormone health comes down to receptor functionality. It's not the levels where we've really gotten wooed away from reality is that we say, oh, you should measure hormones only with saliva or only with urine or only with blood. And we look at the levels and we base intervention on that. But when I worked at Tulane, I had the honor of working with Elwood Jensen, who discovered that hormones deliver their signals to receptors. Before him, it was enzymatic actions. No one believed in receptors. He found the first receptor, so to speak, and they named it ER alpha or ER1. And then Yanaki Gustafson discovered the second receptor. And they would go on and on at our hormone meetings, which there were 33 years of them. And the last few years were called hormone. Before that, they were called estrogens in the environment. And they would talk about the importance of receptor functionality. So if you have competing inhibitors, so you have pollutants sitting on there, the hormone can't get in. You can have the most perfect levels ever in your blood, your urine, wherever you're testing them, in your fingernails. But you don't know what's happening at the receptor. And then all of your good food that should be digested, many of the nutrients need to be able to sit there and aid in the process of the hormone delivering a signal to the gene inside that cell. So hormone health is this big tapestry. You always want to look at the bigger and bigger and bigger picture. it's not just the level of a hormone, it's whether it can really deliver its signal to the gene inside the cell, and that's multifactorial. So I decided to create a product that would clean off the receptors and enhance receptor functionality. And then I created another product to keep hormones acting safer, as we're all going to start taking hormones more and more as we're learning about their safety. But how do you make sure that they stay safe? So my first product is called Receptor Detox. I think it's called Daily Receptor Detox. And you can double up on it to do detoxes, or before you start hormonal therapies, you can double up on it for a week just to clear off your receptors so you get the better bang for your buck when you have the script intervention. And then with the next product, it's a daily hormone balance. And it's I had designed Metagenics' first female line for doctors called the Fem line in the 80s. So I had a lot of good feedback from working with those products for years. And I've taken that information and brought it forward now to biotics. And hopefully this will be many, many other products in this new female line for biotics. So almost all of their formulators have been men. All of their lecturers have been male doctors. I am the first, as far as I know, female formulator for them and female lecturer for them. I'm giving my first lecture for the pandemic for biotics in May, mid-May in Houston, Texas. So if you want to come on down, y'all, and hang out with me, we have 7 hours of me. God, can you handle it? I don't know if you can handle it. Called Everything You Ever Want to Know About Hormones and Didn't Know Who to Ask. So it's 7 hours where we look at hormones every which way, and we go into testing, treating, dosing, writing scripts, everything. So that's exciting. So that's one thing that's coming out. And I guess what we're all going to have to do is figure out a place where we'll all get to live and dance together. And I would love to do a lot of that cooking, because I don't know how many of you know how much I love to cook.
You do love to cook. And we are right now at our hour-and-a-half point, and I think your voice is about to go. So I know I certainly did learn a lot and appreciate all that you shared tonight. I think everybody else did, from the different comments that I've seen both on Facebook and in the chat here on Zoom. So thank you, everyone. I'll let you say goodbye.
Blessings, everybody. May the nitric oxide or nitrogen monoxide force be with you.